Clara Hastings was admired for her perfect life in Surrey, but behind the polished walls of her home, Marcus Hastings was hiding a secret affair with Eliza Morton, Clara's trusted assistant, and that betrayal was only the beginning of a nightmare that would end in obsession, disappearance, and murder. Please subscribe for daily new update of crime story and watch till end. Clara Hastings was the kind of woman who made everything look effortless. She had grown up in the quiet suburbs of Surrey, far removed from scandal or drama, and she carried herself with the kind of calm that made people feel safe around her. Her neighbors admired her polished home, the manicured garden that always seemed to bloom brighter than theirs, and the way she balanced her career with motherhood. Clara worked as a charity event organizer, traveling frequently across London to arrange high-profile galas and fundraisers, and her reputation in that world was flawless. When she returned home in the evenings, she slipped into the role of mother and wife with the same grace. To the people around her, she was someone who had managed to have it all: success, family, and love. Her husband, Marcus, added to that picture of perfection. He was a well-respected architect, whose projects often appeared in glossy design magazines. Together, they seemed to embody the image of a modern, accomplished couple living a dream life. But like many things that look perfect from the outside, the Hastings life had cracks that were hidden just beneath the surface. Marcus spent long hours at work, sometimes late into the night, reviewing plans and meeting clients, and Clara's schedule often kept her away from home as well. Their two children, still young enough to crave constant attention, were often left in the care of nannies and part-time help. Clara felt the strain but believed she was doing her best for her family. When her workload increased to the point where she could no longer manage everything on her own, she decided to hire an assistant. That was when Eliza Morton entered their lives. Eliza was in her late 20s, energetic, eager to prove herself, and at first, everything Clara thought she needed. She handled the endless phone calls, managed schedules, and even picked up small tasks around the house when Clara was stretched too thin. Clara appreciated her reliability and trusted her completely, never once imagining that Eliza might have motives that reached far beyond professional ambition. From the very beginning, Eliza was observant. She noticed how Marcus's eyes lingered on Clara when she walked into a room, but also how often those glances turned into something colder when Clara wasn't looking. She noticed the long silences between them at dinner, the hurried goodbyes when Clara rushed off to another event, and the way Marcus sometimes sat alone at his desk late at night, staring into nothing. Eliza recognized loneliness and she saw opportunity in it. Where Clara saw Eliza as a loyal worker, Marcus saw her as someone who listened, someone who seemed to understand him in ways his wife no longer did. It started with small exchanges, harmless conversations about work, casual comments about how hard Clara pushed herself. Soon those exchanges grew into longer talks, shared drinks in the kitchen after the children had gone to bed, and stolen moments when Clara was away. Clara remained blissfully unaware, convinced her life was exactly what she had worked so hard to build. She smiled when neighbors complimented her family, proud of what she believed she had achieved. But under the surface, a storm was beginning to form. Eliza's presence in their lives was more than helpful. It was dangerous. She was patient, calculating, and quietly weaving herself into the fabric of the Hastings household, setting the stage for a nightmare Clara could never have predicted. Eliza Morton had a way of blending into the background, but she also knew how to make herself noticed when it mattered most. At first, she played the part of the perfect assistant, efficient, organized, polite, never overstepping boundaries. But behind the polite smiles and the careful notes she took during meetings, her mind was working differently. She admired Clara for her poise and reputation, but admiration slowly twisted into envy. Clara had the family, the wealth, the influence, and the stability that Eliza craved. Marcus Hastings, however, became her main point of focus. He was charming, with the kind of easy confidence that came from years of success, and she quickly realized how vulnerable he truly was. It started innocently enough. Marcus often came home late from the office, and if Clara wasn't there, Eliza would sometimes still be around, tidying up after the children or checking schedules for the following week. A few times, she offered him a drink. A glass of wine after a stressful day didn't seem unusual, and Marcus accepted. Their conversations were casual at first, about work deadlines, about the pressures of balancing career and family, but Eliza listened with more attention than Clara did. She leaned in, laughed at his stories, and gave him the kind of admiration that stroked his ego. It was something Marcus didn't even know he had been missing until it was in front of him. One evening, Clara was away in London for a gala, and Eliza stayed late, helping prepare invitations for another event. Marcus came into the room, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, looking more tired than usual. When Eliza handed him a finished stack of letters, their hands brushed, and the silence between them felt different. Neither pulled away quickly. That moment became the turning point. From then on, boundaries blurred. The late-night talks grew longer. The excuses to spend time together became more frequent, and before long, an affair had begun. Marcus told himself it was temporary, a distraction, something he could control. But Eliza didn't see it that way. To her, every stolen kiss and secret meeting was proof that she was meant to take Clara's place. She began to picture herself living in the Hastings home, raising the children as her own, and sharing the life Clara had built. She grew bolder, finding ways to insert herself into Marcus's day beyond what her job required. She'd bring him coffee at the office, send him messages late at night, and remind him constantly of how misunderstood he was. Clara, too busy and trusting, didn't notice the shift. To her, Marcus seemed distracted, but she thought it was the stress of work. She didn't see how Eliza's eyes lingered on her husband when they were in the same room, or how Marcus avoided her gaze afterward. To everyone else, life went on as usual. But under the surface, Eliza's feelings were turning into an obsession. For her, the affair wasn't about passion. It was about possession. What had started as a dangerous attraction was quickly becoming a plan, and Eliza was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Clara Hastings had always trusted her instincts, but lately they seemed to fail her. For years she had been sharp and organized, able to juggle meetings, fundraisers, and her home life without losing her balance. Yet, as autumn drifted into the year, she began noticing small things slipping through the cracks, details that didn't add up. It started with money. A few £100 missing from her joint account caught her attention one morning while she was paying suppliers. She assumed it was Marcus making purchases for his projects. But when she asked him casually, he brushed it off, saying he hadn't touched the account in weeks. Clara let it go, thinking she must have forgotten a transfer. But the next month, the amount missing was larger, and by then, her confidence began to waver. At the same time, strange things happened at work. Emails she had never written were sent to her board members, suggesting last-minute cancellations of meetings or spreading misinformation about event schedules. She was embarrassed when colleagues questioned her decisions, and even more alarmed when her best friend mentioned receiving a cruel, gossipy message that seemed to come from Clara's personal email. She couldn't understand how it was possible. Passwords were changed, yet the sabotage continued. Somewhere in the shadows, someone was carefully dismantling her credibility. At home, Clara found herself forgetting where she placed important documents. Contracts disappeared from her files. Receipts she needed for accounting were gone. Once, she found a drawer left open in her office. Papers scattered as though someone had rifled through them. She thought perhaps the children had been playing, but something inside her whispered that it wasn't so simple. More unsettling were the subtle changes in her daily life. Like the bedroom window she was sure she had locked but found slightly ajar in the morning, or the faint smell of her perfume on a coat she hadn't worn in weeks. She wanted to dismiss these details, but together they began to paint a picture that chilled her. Clara's sleep became restless. She lay awake, wondering if she was imagining things, if the stress of her career and family had finally pushed her into paranoia. Marcus noticed her unease but attributed it to overwork. He told her to take a break, but instead of comfort, his words left her more unsettled. She began to question whether he even noticed what was happening around them, or worse, whether he didn't want to notice. The one person who seemed calm and unfazed during all of this was Eliza. She carried on with her work, smiling politely, offering reassurances when Clara looked tired. Yet Clara couldn't ignore how often Eliza appeared to know things she hadn't shared. She brushed it aside, unwilling to believe her assistant could be anything but loyal. But what Clara didn't realize was that Eliza had woven herself into every corner of her life, pulling threads one by one, waiting for the entire fabric to unravel. By the time Clara began to suspect something larger was at play, the trap was already closing around her, silent and deliberate. The night Clara Hastings discovered the truth began like so many others, ordinary and unremarkable. She had returned home late from another charity function, exhausted but content with the success of the evening. Marcus was already asleep, or so she thought, and the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. While unpacking her bag, she reached for her work tablet to check an email she had forgotten about earlier. That was when she saw them, messages that did not belong to her, words typed not in her voice but in Marcus's. At first, she thought it was a draft or a misfiled document, but as she scrolled further, her stomach tightened. They weren't emails at all, they were intimate messages exchanged between Marcus and Eliza. Her hands trembled as she read. Words of longing, plans for secret meetings, and subtle insults about her. The woman Marcus had once sworn to love above all others. Every sentence was a blade, cutting deeper, unraveling the image of the life she thought she knew. She wanted to scream, to wake Marcus and demand the truth. But instead she sat frozen, staring at the screen until the room blurred through her tears. When she finally confronted him, Marcus admitted it, but his words were cold and defensive. He claimed it was over, that it had been a mistake, nothing more than a moment of weakness. Clara heard the apology, but it did nothing to ease the dread building inside her. Something about his tone, his lack of urgency, made her realize this betrayal was bigger than he admitted. That night, Clara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every sound in the house seemed louder, sharper, as though the walls themselves whispered secrets. She got up to close the curtains in the bedroom and noticed something that made her skin crawl. The window latch was loose. She was certain she had locked it that morning. It wasn't the first time either. Twice before she had found the same window slightly ajar, brushed off as forgetfulness. But now, after reading those messages, it felt like a warning, a sign that her home wasn't as safe as she had believed. Clara began noticing other small things in the days that followed. Her phone battery drained quickly, as if an app was running in the background she hadn't opened. Marcus's explanations became shorter, less convincing, and his temper flared at simple questions. Even Eliza's presence seemed darker. The assistant was still polite, still efficient, but Clara caught her watching in ways that made her shiver, quick glances that held no warmth, only calculation. Clara told herself she was being paranoid, that betrayal did not always mean danger, yet deep down, she felt the shift. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. Someone was invading her life, crossing invisible boundaries, and she no longer knew who she could trust. Every corner of her home seemed tainted, every shadow heavier. She understood, with a clarity that shook her, that the affair was not the end of her problems. It was only the beginning of something much worse, something that waited in silence, biding its time. Eliza Morton's obsession had grown into something poisonous, feeding on the cracks in Clara's marriage and widening them into dangerous fractures. At first, she had been content with the stolen moments she shared with Marcus, the thrill of secrecy, the validation of being chosen over the woman she envied. But that satisfaction faded quickly, replaced by a hunger for permanence. Eliza didn't just want Marcus's affection, she wanted his entire life, and she was willing to take whatever steps were necessary to claim it. Clara began to sense the darkness pressing closer. It started with notes left in strange places. One appeared tucked into the pocket of her coat as she prepared to leave for work. The handwriting was sharp and uneven, the words simple but chilling, You can't keep him forever. Another was slipped into the pages of her planner, hidden between appointments. Clara showed Marcus, but he dismissed it as a prank or the result of her overworked imagination. His indifference only deepened her unease. She started to feel as though she was standing alone on the edge of a cliff, warning of danger while everyone around her insisted the ground was solid. The threats escalated in more terrifying ways. One afternoon, Clara received a phone call from her children's school. A woman had arrived unexpectedly, claiming she had been sent by Clara to collect them early. The staff, cautious, refused to release the children and phoned her immediately. Clara's heart nearly stopped as she listened. The school could not identify the woman. She had vanished before anyone could stop her. Clara drove there in a panic, clutching the steering wheel with white knuckles, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Marcus, when told, suggested it must have been a misunderstanding, but Clara knew better. It wasn't a mistake. Someone was circling her family like a predator. At home, her sense of safety eroded further. Doors she was sure she had locked were sometimes left open. Lights flickered in rooms she hadn't entered. Once she found a family photograph on the mantel turned face down, as though someone had deliberately touched it. The atmosphere of the house changed. It no longer felt like the sanctuary it once had been. She began checking windows before bed, double-locking doors, and keeping her phone close even in the shower. Still, the dread clung to her, whispering that she was already too late. Marcus, wrapped in guilt and denial, distanced himself more each day. He refused to acknowledge Eliza's hold, convincing himself she had moved on. But Clara saw the signs, the subtle smirk on Eliza's face during work, the confidence in her tone, the way she carried herself as though she already belonged in the Hastings household. Eliza's obsession was no longer hidden. It was deliberate, bold, and dangerous. Clara felt trapped between fear and disbelief, unable to convince those closest to her of the threat that stalked her steps. She didn't realize that Eliza had already crossed the line between fantasy and action. What had begun as a dangerous attraction was now a deadly fixation, and the walls of Clara's once perfect life were closing in around her, inch by inch. The night Clara Hastings vanished was bitterly cold, the kind of November evening where the streets emptied early and the air seemed heavy with silence. She had been working at a charity event, a fundraiser held in the elegant hall of a Surrey estate. Guests remembered her, moving gracefully between tables, her smile warm, though her eyes appeared tired. By the time the event ended, Clara lingered a little longer than usual, chatting with colleagues, as though delaying the moment of going home. When she finally left, it was close to midnight. She was seen walking toward her car parked just beyond the main gates. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The following morning, panic erupted. Clara's car was discovered abandoned near the venue. The keys were still in the ignition, her handbag neatly placed on the passenger seat, untouched. Nothing suggested robbery or accident. To the police it appeared she had simply stepped out of her life and vanished into the night. But those who knew Clara dismissed the idea immediately. She would never have left her children willingly, never abandoned the work she poured her heart into. Something darker had happened. Marcus reported her missing with a strained voice, insisting he had no idea where she could be, but detectives sensed unease in his demeanor, a kind of restraint that felt unnatural for a grieving husband. The investigation turned quickly to those closest to Clara, as they often do, and Marcus was questioned repeatedly. He denied any involvement, though his affair with Eliza soon surfaced, making him a figure of suspicion. The revelation shocked Clara's friends and family, but to investigators it offered a possible motive: jealousy, betrayal, or the desire to remove obstacles from a new life. Eliza, too, fell under the glare of suspicion. Her fingerprints were discovered on Clara's abandoned car, raising more questions than answers. She explained them away, claiming she often ran errands for Clara and sometimes helped carry documents to and from the vehicle. On paper, her excuse seemed plausible, but the timing was damning. Why had her prints been found in such abundance, when Clara was known to be meticulous about her belongings? Search teams combed the surrounding woodland, Volunteers joined police in scouring fields and rivers, but days turned into weeks with no trace of Clara. Newspapers printed her smiling photograph across front pages, headlines describing a devoted mother who had vanished without explanation. Whispers spread through the quiet Surrey town, speculation mingling with fear. Neighbors avoided eye contact with cacus at the shops, their polite smiles replaced by suspicion. Parents at the children's school spoke in hushed tones, fearful for their own families, wondering if someone dangerous lurked among them. Through it all, Marcus kept up appearances, though cracks began to show. His statements to police wavered, details shifting under scrutiny. He claimed to have been home the entire evening, yet gaps in his timeline emerged. Investigators noted the tension between him and Eliza when questioned separately, as though both were protecting secrets neither dared reveal. By the end of the month, Clara was still missing, but the calm surface of the Hastings family had shattered completely. The picture-perfect life that once inspired envy had become a spectacle of scandal and suspicion. Everyone close to Clara felt the truth was hiding in plain sight, but no one could yet prove how the devoted mother of two had disappeared into the shadows the night. Weeks of silence ended in a grim discovery that shattered any lingering hope of finding Clara alive. A group of hikers stumbled upon disturbed earth in a dense woodland area just outside London. The ground appeared uneven, freshly turned, despite the cold season. When police were called, the digging confirmed what many had feared. Beneath the soil lay Clara Hastings, buried in a shallow grave. Her once vibrant presence was reduced to silence, her body wrapped hastily as though the burial had been done in fear rather than respect. The scene told investigators that this was not the work of a stranger passing by, but someone who knew her well. Someone who had been desperate to hide the truth. The post-mortem revealed the chilling details. Clara had been poisoned before death, a slow-acting substance that weakened her body, leaving her vulnerable. She had then been suffocated, ensuring there would be no chance of survival. It was not a crime of opportunity or sudden rage. It was deliberate, methodical, and planned. The brutality shocked even seasoned detectives. Whoever had done this had not only wanted Clara gone but had gone to great lengths to ensure she would never fight back. Eliza Morton's name resurfaced almost instantly. Her connection to Marcus, her fingerprints in Clara's car, and her increasingly erratic behavior all pointed toward her. Investigators pieced together her movements, and gaps in her alibi appeared. Witnesses recalled seeing her near the area on the night Clara disappeared, though she denied it. Still, circumstantial evidence wasn't enough. The breakthrough came when forensic teams discovered fibers from Eliza's clothing on the blanket used to wrap Clara's body. It was a link she couldn't explain away. But as detectives built their case, another shocking twist emerged. Marcus himself was implicated, though not as the killer. Phone records revealed calls between him and Eliza on the night of Clara's disappearance, their exchanges lasting long after Clara should have been home. More damning, investigators discovered Marcus had destroyed critical evidence in the days following her vanishing. Security footage from the estate where the charity event was held had been mysteriously corrupted. A technician later confirmed it had been deliberately tampered with, and Marcus had the skills and access to make it happen. When confronted, Marcus confessed to knowing more than he had admitted. He claimed he hadn't planned Clara's death, that he had panicked once Eliza confessed to him what she had done. Instead of going to the police, he had chosen to protect himself, helping Eliza cover tracks in hopes the crime would never be traced back to them. His selfishness had ensured Clara's killer nearly walked free. In court, the evidence painted a grim picture. Eliza, consumed by obsession, had orchestrated the murder, believing Clara's absence would clear the path for her future with Marcus. Marcus, terrified of losing his career and reputation, had chosen silence and destruction over truth. Together, their actions sealed Clara's fate and destroyed the lives of those around her. What had begun as a secret affair spiraled into betrayal, obsession, and murder, leaving Clara's children orphaned in all but name. The courtroom held its breath as the story unfolded, a reminder that the deadliest betrayals often come from within the home. The trial of Eliza Morton and Marcus Hastings gripped the nation. Courtrooms overflowed with journalists, neighbors, and members of the public who wanted to see justice served for Clara. Every detail of the affair, the deception, and the murder was laid bare under the harsh lights of justice. The polished image of the Hastings family was destroyed piece by piece, replaced by a chilling portrait of betrayal and obsession. The prosecution painted Eliza as a woman consumed by jealousy, willing to poison and suffocate another human being just to take her place. They showed the fibers, the fingerprints, the secret communications, and the disturbing notes Clara had received. Against this mountain of evidence, Eliza's denials fell apart. She sat silent in the dock, her face pale, her eyes cold, offering no remorse. Marcus's role shocked the courtroom just as much. Though he had not killed Clara, his cowardice and selfish choices had sealed her fate. By destroying evidence and lying to investigators, he had allowed precious time to slip away, time that might have revealed the truth sooner. The defense argued he had acted out of fear, overwhelmed by Eliza's confession and terrified of losing his children if the affair was exposed. But the jury saw through the excuses. Fear did not excuse complicity. Silence did not erase responsibility. When the verdicts were read, the air seemed to still. Eliza Morton was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of release for decades. Marcus Hastings received 18 years for conspiracy and obstruction, his reputation shattered, his freedom taken. For Clara's family, there was no relief, only a dull ache that justice could never truly heal. Her parents, who had sat through every painful testimony, wept quietly as the sentences were handed down. They were left to pick up the pieces of two young lives torn apart by the selfishness of the very people who should have protected them. Clara's children, too young to understand fully, asked questions that no one could answer without breaking. In time, they were placed in the care of their grandparents, surrounded by love but haunted by absence. The Hastings home stood empty, its polished rooms now a hollow shell. Neighbors avoided the street, unable to look at the house without remembering the headlines. The once envied family had become a cautionary tale, a reminder that behind even the most perfect facade, darkness could grow unnoticed until it consumed everything. Clara's charity colleagues dedicated their next fundraiser to her memory, but even in those moments of honor, there was an unshakable grief that her life had ended so needlessly, so cruelly. In prison, Eliza remained defiant, never admitting guilt, clinging to the fantasy that had driven her actions. Marcus, meanwhile, faded into obscurity, his name now synonymous with betrayal rather than success. Yet for all the focus on them, it was Clara's absence that lingered most heavily. A woman who had devoted herself to helping others, whose life had seemed so full of promise, reduced to a tragic story of love twisted into obsession and trust shattered by deceit. The nightmare had ended in sentences and prison walls, but for those left behind, it never truly ended. Clara Hastings's memory lived on, not just in photographs or whispered stories, but as a permanent scar on a family and a community that would never again look at love, loyalty, or safety in the same way.